Deputy Lawless.
Thank you, Les Cancorda. I intend to share time with Deputy Timmy Dooley. He's on the way to the House. Thank you, Les Cancorda. Minister, Deputy Smith, who introduced the bill, and interested parties in the gallery. I'm very familiar with the issues at play here. As a member of the committee, which has been debating this issue ad nauseum and at length for the last 2 years, and in more recent months has been debating the issue in detail, indeed the procedural issues which are at the heart of the motion before us today. I know only too well the issues at play and the very necessary and important wider climate action debate and the very real necessity for urgent and emergency action on what is an emergency situation. And I'll return to the substantive points of the matter. However, before I deal with the substance of the bill, I think it's important to address the procedural and technical matters which are at the heart of tonight's motion. It is worth reflecting the procedural issue because it's critical actually that we address that, not just for this bill but for many other bills and items like it before the House. New Politics has promised a lot but delivered little. New Politics promised and still contains an opportunity for separation of powers to be actually manifested within these houses. The notion, as is reflected in our Constitution, that we have an executive, a judiciary and a parliament, all equal but opposite, all holding each other to account, a paramount principle of modern parliamentary democracy, one which we should hold dear and execute, but unfortunately has been on more in the breach than on the observance for most of the time of the state because we've had majority government. The job of the legislature, funnily enough, is to legislate. But with all powerful executives, with majorities in the House, that has not been the experience of many Dáil. Indeed, this is the first Dáil where the numbers dictate that actually can come into being. However, despite having an arithmetic that private members' motions can and should get to the floor of the House, be debated, progress, be debated for the policy merit rather than what colour or what flag or what banner they come in from. The experience of the last 3 years has been that procedural devices and technical amendments are found to frustrate bills. Because the government can no longer command a majority in the House, it cannot simply vote down a measure from the other side. Instead, things like money messages, procedural matters, voting arrangements, technical reasons are put forward to delay and frustrate legislation. I myself have 4 different items of legislation, PMBs before the House, still at different stages. There are many bills across from education to environment to housing across the board, and some of the deputies have mentioned already other examples. And it is critical for those bills as it is for this bill that we address the procedural lacuna and send a message to government that it is not good enough to delay and frustrate private members' bills in infinitum. And I think the motion is, I commend the deputies for bringing forward this motion to try to address this deadlock because it's not a good state of affairs. On the substantive matter, I joined students outside Naas, outside 4 schools in Naas Friday week, 2 Fridays ago, who took a stand, who came out as young people to take a stand and make their views known that enough is enough, and to plead with, I suppose, us to state their concern, significant concern at the failure of many before their generation to protect and safeguard the planet that they will inherit. I'm very proud to say that my own daughter Niamh was amongst those who actually travelled up on a bus that day from Naas to Leinster House and stood outside the gates here to be part of a protest and part of that movement, joining others, many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of others worldwide on the same day as part of a growing movement, because their generation get it. Their generation understand that this is a real climate emergency, probably the most significant issue to face our planet at this time. And they're saying enough is enough. We know from the literature, we know from the academics that climate change is real. We understand that the increase in global temperature over the previous 150, 200 years since the Industrial Revolution has been greater in that period of time than in the previous 2 millennia before it. We know that this is not sustainable. We know that the time for action is now, and that has been borne out by many, many academic experts at the committee. We have engaged. The suggestions from some quarters that this is a rushed bill, this is a piece of legislation being rushed through as a systemic item, I think is untrue. I think the reality is we have actually had substantive policy debates at committee with relevant academic experts, national and international, and we've had the technical argument. The likes of Professor John Sweeney from Maynooth University has pointed out that we fought 27th out of 28 countries in the European League table in terms of our performance on climate change. We are only second last behind Poland, which has a natural dependency on coal, being was given the geography. And that's not bottom of the table, or second bottom of the league table is not a place that we want to be. But even if we were to disregard the academic experts, and if we were to accept that there are experts on both sides, which is the case, we only need to use the evidence of our own eyes. If we look to last year, we had the beast from the east, which was only succeeded a few months later by the drought from the south. We had two of the most extreme weather situations in living memory, or perhaps in longer, occurring in the last 18 months. So the proof is there for all of us to see. As the young people get it, the next generation get it, the opposition get it, I think, in this House. I think it's time for the government to get it and actually start to take these issues seriously and to respond on them. I want to pay tribute to my colleagues on the committee, on the Climate Action Committee, the Communications, Energy and Climate Action Committee, and to Deputy Smith for proposing the bill, and all the committee that have engaged in substantive, as I say, debate and exploration of these issues. I also want to pay tribute to the role of civic society and the likes of Trócaire, Stop Climate Chaos, Friends of the Earth, and many other groups and advocacy groups who have played such a significant part in, I suppose, creating the context and raising the ante to highlight these issues and actually get them and assist politically in getting them to this stage. I think it's been a crucial part, the momentum on this and other bills like it, like the divestment bill, which we passed and celebrated last summer, other bills which have gone through of like nature. And again, there's momentum, I think, building all the time. It is important to say that the bill will go, and Fianna Fáil are supporting this motion when it goes to vote later in the week. We are supporting it. We think it's very important that the principle be upheld, that the Dáil cannot be frustrated by technical manoeuvres at committee and elsewhere. However, it is not a complete unconditional support. We will be introducing amendments at committee. We will be looking forward to, again, a robust, substantive engagement at committee stage, because we do need to manage. We do need to recognise some concerns that are raised around energy security, around continuity of supply, around external sources that may be less preferable to meet our energy needs, and how we transition that and how we manage that transition, and to recognise the unfortunate reality that there will be dependence on traditional fossil fuels for some time to come, albeit as we move away and as we begin the journey to move away from that. But it is important that we manage that transition and do so in a responsible way. So we will be engaging committee on those points. But in terms of, I think, if we were to repeat the mistakes of the past, if we were to begin, and the arguments we make, can we do another round, can we do another round, can we keep looking, can we find something else before we put a lid on it, can we see what else is out there? That's a self-sustaining prophecy. That's a self-fulfilling myth, because if we keep on searching, and even if we keep finding, we are actually generating and propagating an industry that will propel itself. If we are to continue to extract and explore and continue the cycle and create jobs and create a local economy based on those in that industry, that becomes a self-perpetuating myth, and we never begin to make the transition away from it, which is so important that we begin to make that now. And in actual fact, there is a whole false economy there, because we can have a far more successful, sustainable, future-proofed, engineering-based technology solution of a green revolution. If we actually embrace renewable energy and all the potential that it offers, that in itself is a huge potential source of economic activity and economic growth in the regions where it's based and on the wider national scale, contributing to GDP. There is also the point someone has made about the potential loss, the potential loss to, I suppose, to the sovereign, to the state. Why should we turn our back on all these reserves, the potential untapped reserves that are out there? Apart from the point I've made about, where do you stop, about the self-fulfilling cycle that perpetuates itself at the expense, at the opportunity cost of a significant green revolution. There's also the point, I think it's actually a moot argument, and we've had this at a committee, if there are such vast resources of fuels of various types off the coast and around our seas, why haven't we found them in the last 50 years? The CORB, I believe, is being wrapped up, I think, is ultimately loss-making. There's been a few other smaller finds, but we've had 50 years to find them. So there's been plenty of time to actually do this. And we're approaching a point where we have to draw a line under the sand and say that we've reached a point of no return. What we do have, what we have plenty of, is wind, wave. Of the Atlantic coast, on the edge of Europe, we have plenty of potential energy of the green nature. I think we can generate 5 gigawatts of energy running a couple of offshore windmills along the Atlantic coast, enough to meet Ireland's energy needs from that alone. Of course, there are other solutions, solar, biomass, wind, wave, etc. But there is huge resources there which are untapped, and we need to change the mindset, we need to change the culture, and we need to begin to transition into that way forward, because we cannot sit on our hands and delay action forever. We, as I say, will be supporting the motion when to go to the next stage. I think it's very important that the House asserts itself on matters like this and other similar private members' bills. I say we do have, we engage substantively on the issue. We support the broad thrust of the bill. We will have amendments in terms of energy security and in terms of some of the transition phase and how that's managed and what kind of time cycle is involved there. And we will engage on those points at committee. But for now, I commend the bill to the House.